Enjoy these scenes with life door photography.
Mark of the Pacific Northwest, many peepers from the air, or is 9,000 feet above everything along. Up it's 14,400. The summits of all the peaks around you can be surveyed. My wife Julie and I went there for a number of reasons. That there we could find, study, photograph wildlife in 4 zones without leaving the environment. The lowest zone is the humid transition. Here on the west, rainfall produced forests and giant trees like the Douglas fir, the western hemlock, and the Western Red Cedar. These trees are coveted by the logging industry, and sometimes even the establishment of a park cannot protect them. One of the largest mammals in this zone is the mule deer. The Mount Rainier herd, about 600 strong, remains in good balance over the years without control. This one is just contracting its paunch to bring cud into its mouth. Deer, like cows, are ruminants and quickly swallow food as it's browsed. This food passes into the paunch, where it remains until the deer has an opportunity to sit quietly, regurgitate and chew its cud, as the saying goes. Porcupines are not unusual inhabitants of this zone. This is a young fellow, and he's having some difficulty climbing the log. During winter, porcupines feed on the bark of trees and can be destructive in this way. But in summer, they eat leaves and new twigs, grasses, and succulent plants. This is the long-eared owl. Most owls pass the daylight hours in hollow trees or wherever they can get away from the light and hunt during the night. The long-eared owl usually spends the day in the thick foliage of evergreen trees. Notice how the pupil exposed to the light is smaller than the one in the shadow. A landmark in the park is Longmire Meadows, named for James Longmire, who discovered these mineral springs in 1883. He had dreams of developing them as health waters, and even pushed in a road and built a small hotel. This is one of the springs called Iron Mike because of the apparent iron content of the water. The mineral springs are now a favorite spot of the band-tailed pigeons. They roost in the tall trees surrounding the meadow, but drop down to drink the water so rich in minerals. They came close to extinction at one time, but were saved, as were other species of American birds, by the passage in 1913 of the federal law for the protection of migratory birds. This is the Rocky Mountain elk, or wapiti, and was introduced here from the Yellowstone region. The Olympic elk no longer ranges here, but the wapiti doesn't differ greatly except it's a bit smaller and lighter colored. Harlequin ducks often are seen on these fast mountain waters. But it's the beaver pond and the wet willow bottom areas that are most prolific of wildlife, and Julie and I concentrated on them. It's in this environment we found the Rufous hummingbird, the tiniest of birds. Their wings are about a quarter of their total weight. They fly backwards, up, down, sideways, with wings beating about 80 times a second. This one is feeding on the nectar of the Oregon betony. This environment, too, is the favorite nesting spot of the Wilson's warbler. The black cap is very distinctive. And of the yellow warbler, and all yellow bird which builds a nest of woven wood fibers and grass. It eats and feeds its young on insects and spiders. All the mountain streams rush down to the sea. Along their banks as they descend, the vegetation and wildlife changes. The Canadian zone extends from 3 up to 5,000 feet. Comet Falls is one of the highest and most spectacular of the many falls of Mount Rainier. It drops 320 feet. At such falls, you're likely to encounter the dipper. Notice the white membrane as it blinks its eye. This is an additional protection for the eye to be used, we believe, as it searches underwater for food. This bird gets its name from the characteristic bobbing in its walk. It likes to nest behind the falls where it can keep its home damp. Rainier is also famous for its color, never grazed, as untouched as the land can be. These meadows of wildflowers themselves are worth the climb this far. The rock faces are splotched with the red of cliff penstemon. And here's where the common bear grass flourishes. This is the blossom of the cliff penstemon. The varied thrush is a bird of the mountain slopes, very much like our robin in shape and size. In the Hudsonian Zone, we've almost reached the tree line. Biologists tell us that every 1,000 feet we go up Mount Rainier is the equivalent of traveling 400 miles toward the North Pole. So we seem to meet spring time and time again. The avalanche lily is the first to bloom after the snow melts. This bloom is about 2 inches across and stands about a foot high. There may be several flowers on a stem. The blue grouse is so well camouflaged in its environment that it could easily be missed. This is the female. The Cascade hoary marmot, named for its white mantle, is one of the largest North American rodents, 20 inches long, with a 9-inch tail. Weight about 15 pounds. These are the only moderate-sized mammals that live in the high country all year round. They probably take themselves very seriously, but I found them very funny to watch. wrestling activity is likely connected with courtship or territory in some way. They don't seem to be hurting each other, but little is known about it. When the match is over, they'll go back to eating and digging. Cassin's finch is a mountain bird. It takes a lot of dedication to get a look at one in the flesh. Or should I say feather. The ground squirrel also lives here, another member of the rodent family. This one is called the Cascades golden-mantled ground squirrel. Like the marmot, strictly vegetarian. Here, too, we found a blue grouse going through a courtship performance. Or maybe it was a rehearsal. We couldn't see a female anywhere. Entering the Arctic Alpine Zone is like going to a different world. Vegetation is sparse. Depending on the snowfall, the open slopes are not cleared until July or early August. One wonders how and why life of any kind would choose to be here. Yet there's the water pipit, feeding amongst the alpine yellow mimulus, and finding insect food enough for its needs. And there's the white-tailed ptarmigan. This is the male, showing more white feathers than the female, and the red eye patch. This bird even has feathers on its feet, and therefore it can walk more easily in deep snow. The hen will usually lay from 6 to 8 eggs, but as many as 15 have been reported. She nests on the hillside, and her coloration camouflages her from marauders. Her chicks are precocious. As soon as they hatch, they're able to walk and feed themselves. And all they need from their mother is guidance at this early stage, and her warmth during the cold nights and stormy weather of this elevation. As we approached the snowfields near 7,000 feet, we encountered in mid-July The first flowers of spring pushing through the snow itself. The glacier lily. Not far away, we saw a hoary marmot that looked as though he was making his first springtime appearance after a hard winter. His teeth were very long, proof that he hadn't been using them much, since they grow continuously. He seemed a little thin and scrawny looking to me. There are about 400 mountain goats in Mount Rainier Park. These are well-adapted creatures. I know of few occasions, perhaps after an extremely heavy snowfall, when they can be found below 7,000 feet. Usually there's enough wind in these elevations to keep areas clear where they can find food. This is a nanny. One further reason Julie and I chose Mount Rainier to visit is the fact that here we could see and even traverse a number of glaciers, notably the Emmons and the Nisqually. However, this peak has 26 named glaciers originating on it, and 15 of these are classed as major ones. The Emmons is the largest, a mile wide and 5 miles long. The glacial action creates the greatest change in the mountain, which is loosely held together and easily eroded. In 1963, the Emmons had so undermined a satellite of Rainier that it collapsed and sent 14 million cubic yards of rock spilling down the glacier at speeds up to 300 miles an hour. The debris from this happening still covers the Emmons surface. This is the Nisqually Glacier. The snowfields and lower reaches of Rainier are favorite tourist spots and attract large numbers of visitors all summer. The Paradise Ice Caves are only 3 miles from the road. This is the bottom end of the Paradise Glacier, still buried under last year's snowfall. The caves are carved out of the glacial ice by the flow of warm air over the outlet stream. To show how quickly the mountain weather can change, I shot this sequence of time-lapse pictures. It speeds up, but in reality, it almost seems to happen this fast. 1 minute the sun, the next you're standing in dense fog. Precipitation in this area averages about 100 inches a year. At and above 5,000 feet, it's mostly snow. Below that, rain, which explains the existence of so many glaciers. For glaciers are formed because more snow falls each year than the amount that melts each summer. When this continues over a long period, the snow is compacted into ice and begins to move as a mass. The Rainier masses, totaling about 34 square miles of ice, move down about 12 inches a day. To see our glaciers, Julie and I set off to climb Rainier's last 7,000 feet to the top. The first thing we saw up there was a lonely ant. Then winged insects and a spider, and we could only believe they came up on the wind. We we found red snow just below 10,000 feet. This is what mountaineers call it. And it is really a tiny plant known as blue-green algae, a phenomenon of the high places. At Camp Muir, at the 10,000-foot level, we were to pick up the young guides who would accompany us to the top. Because we were traveling to some extent on glaciers, experienced guides were necessary, for such is the shifting and changing action of these ice masses that yesterday's trail could well be impassable today. There were climbing techniques to be learned, rules of behavior to be outlined to us, for we were venturing into completely unfamiliar territory and some danger. All I had to do here was set up my camera and point it, and I had a breathtaking shot. These pictures speak for themselves. For me, this experience on the Queen of the Cascades was unforgettable. And not just because I struggled up this mighty mountain with a few extra pounds of camera gear. It was unforgettable because as I went through it, I was humbled by the grandeur of this mountain. And it saddened me to know that there were men and women who didn't care about such things, who were short-sighted and narrow-minded enough to allow destruction to come to our land in 1,000 places, all in the name of progress. I say, let there be more and more protected areas such as this, so that man can learn to care.